Money has rules most people never see. The wealthy don't just make more money, they play a different game altogether. Once you see how the game works, it's like someone pulling back a curtain. You realize there was a stage behind it all along. The first curtain that gets pulled back is taxes. Most of us think of taxes as this unavoidable thing. You earn, you get paid, the government takes their slice. But for the ultra-rich, taxes are a chessboard. They don't just play defense. They've built entire strategies around turning the tax code into an ally instead of an enemy. Let's start with something that sounds boring but is actually genius. Imagine you own $100,000 in Amazon stock. The normal person, if they need cash, sells some shares. The moment they sell, the government steps in and asks for its cut. Long-term capital gains, short-term capital gains, it doesn't matter. The tax man eats first, but wealthy people don't sell. They borrow against the stock. A bank will happily lend you money using those shares as collateral. That loan is not income, so there's no tax. Your stock continues to grow, untouched. You get cash in hand to spend, and you avoid the very thing that eats away at most people's wealth. Borrow, live, and let the asset grow. That's the rhythm. This is why someone like Elon Musk can say he doesn't really take a salary. His companies are worth hundreds of billions on paper. He doesn't have to sell stock. He borrows against it. He gets access to cash, tax-free. And when the day comes where a big chunk of stock has to be sold, he moves states. Suddenly, he's not in California anymore, where taxes are heavy. He's in Texas, where personal income tax is zero. That's not an accident. That's part of the playbook. For everyday people, this sounds unfair, and in some ways, it is. But there's a lesson hiding in plain sight. If you spend your life as an earner, grinding for a paycheck, you will always get squeezed. The rules aren't made for you. The rules reward ownership. Salary is punished. Assets are protected. Take the example of a couple. One's a partner at a prestigious law firm, making $1 million a year. The other runs a medical practice, pulling in $1.5 million. Together, they're ballers on paper. But in reality, they live in a blue state city. Their combined tax rate can reach close to 50%. They work harder than most, but half their income disappears into the system. Now imagine instead one of them builds a company. They hold on to their shares for 5 years. When the company sells, the first $10 million is tax-free under something called a qualified small business exemption. Same income level, radically different outcome. Why? Because one path was built on earning, the other on owning. The story repeats everywhere. A person grinding out $2 million a year pays more tax than someone who sells a business for $50 million. It's upside down to the middle-class mindset, but perfectly rational in the wealth game. That's the hidden shift. Moving from earner to owner. You want your money to leave the house at night and work for you. That starts small. $500 invested in your 20s feels like nothing. But 500 then is the seed that becomes tens of thousands later. The faster you start planting, the sooner you shift into ownership. And once you're an owner, you get to play the tax game too. The wealthy aren't magicians. They're just playing a game most people don't know exists. There's another move the wealthy make that rarely gets discussed outside of closed doors. It's called state arbitrage. On the surface, it looks innocent. Someone like Jeff Bezos decides to move from Washington state to Florida. People say it's for the weather, or family, or lifestyle. But behind the curtain, it's a simple calculation. By moving, he avoids state income tax on billions of dollars. That's not a small decision. That's tens of billions saved by changing zip codes. Meanwhile, the schools, hospitals, and airports of Washington helped build the empire that created his wealth. Yet the moment a tax bill grows too heavy, the wealthy walk away. The system allows it, and the wealthy know how to take advantage of it. For those still working on the path to wealth, the lesson isn't to resent it. The lesson is to learn the rules early. Every tax code in the world is a book of incentives. Politicians don't write laws to punish wealth. They write laws to guide behavior. If you invest in businesses, you get breaks. If you create jobs, you get breaks. If you hold assets for the long haul, you get breaks. The tax code quietly whispers, own things, don't just earn. But here's the catch. Not all rich people escape taxes. In fact, the sort of rich often pay the heaviest price. Picture a high-level lawyer or doctor making 1 or 2 million a year. They're in urban centers, high-tax states. They can't structure everything as an investment. Their money comes as salary, and salary gets hammered. Compare that to someone who builds a business and later sells it. They can walk away with tens of millions and pay less in taxes than the lawyer grinding 80 hours a week. The irony is painful. The hardest working, high earners often fund the system more than the billionaires at the top. This creates three groups. The bottom half pay little in income tax but a lot in sales tax every time they spend. The super earners, the doctors and lawyers, pay crushing rates. And the owners, the super wealthy, pay single digits. It's not that they're smarter. It's that they switched game. They stopped being workers and became owners. And this is where the truth becomes uncomfortable. The tax code didn't grow from 400 pages to 4,000 because it had to. It grew because each new page created new doors for the wealthy. Every clause, every exception, every special case was written to benefit someone. And the middle class never gets invited to that conversation. The good news? You don't have to play the entire game at once. The key is to start small. Maybe it's holding stock instead of selling. Maybe it's buying a rental property and treating it like a long-term asset instead of flipping. Maybe it's putting money into a small business that qualifies for exemptions later. Every small step nudges you away from the earner's trap and closer to the owner's advantage. And the earlier you begin, the greater the compounding effect. $500 in your 20s is worth $10,000 later. $10,000 invested in your 30s can be worth $100,000 down the line. Ownership compounds not just in growth, but in how the tax code rewards you for owning. The wealthy don't keep secrets because they're too complicated. They keep them because most people don't bother to ask. The curtain is there, and once you see behind it, you can never unsee it. One of the smartest tax strategies the wealthy use is called buy, borrow, die. It sounds morbid, but it's incredibly effective. Step 1, buy appreciating assets like stocks or real estate. Step 2, borrow against them for cash while never triggering taxes. Step 3, pass them down through trusts or inheritance. When heirs receive them, they often get a step up in cost basis, which wipes out the tax liability, generational wealth preserved, taxes legally avoided. It's not magic, it's simply knowing the rules better than everyone else. Ordinary earners think money comes in, you pay taxes, and you spend what's left. The wealthy think assets grow, I borrow against them, I let time do the work, and the system rewards me for patience. Think of it like farming. A worker harvests crops and sells them immediately. The government takes half of the harvest. An owner plants trees. The trees grow fruit year after year. Instead of cutting them down, the owner borrows money using the orchard's value as security. The trees keep producing, the family eats, the orchard grows, and one day the children inherit not just the fruit, but the whole forest. This is why you'll hear about billionaires with vast fortunes who supposedly pay almost nothing in taxes. They don't sell, they borrow, they own, and ownership is rewarded. But there's a danger here too. Borrowing against assets works when the asset keeps rising. When markets fall, leverage can crush you. Many sophisticated investors have gone broke, thinking the climb would never stop. The lesson isn't to copy blindly. The lesson is to understand risk. Ownership creates advantages, but ownership without caution creates collapse. Another hidden advantage sits in business creation. There are clauses like the qualified small business exemption. If you start a company with less than $50 million in value and hold it for 5 years, the first $10 million in gains can be completely tax-free. That's not a myth. That's written into law. People have walked away with tens of millions untouched by taxes because they knew about it and structured their companies correctly. Now contrast that with someone in a traditional job. Same hours, maybe even more stress. Yet their reward is capped by salary, and half of it goes to taxes. That's why the wealthy say, the goal isn't to be a super earner. The goal is to become a super owner. The earner feeds the system. The owner bends the system to their advantage. The sad truth is most people never hear this explained. They believe the game is about working harder, earning more, and climbing the salary ladder, but the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. If you climb high enough as an earner, the taxman waits at the top with a 50% bill. If you climb as an owner, the view is very different. The message here isn't to avoid responsibility. It's to realize that wealth isn't just about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And keeping comes from knowing the rules. There's a myth that wealthy people don't pay taxes at all. That isn't entirely true. Many of them do, but not in the way people imagine. The ones who pay the most are often the high-income earners, not the billionaires. The lawyer billing endless hours, the surgeon running a large practice, the consultant flying city to city. They see their tax rates climb higher and higher because their income is visible, taxable, predictable. Meanwhile, someone who shifts into ownership plays a different role. They structure investments, create entities, move across state lines, and let their assets compound quietly in the background. To most people, this looks unfair. To those playing the game, it looks like common sense. The system was written to reward behavior that builds capital, not just labor. This is why learning about taxes early can be life-changing. Getting good tax advice is like having a secret map. Two people can make the same income. One goes bankrupt. The other becomes wealthy. The difference isn't just work ethic or luck. It's whether they understood how the rules actually work. Think of a young person starting out. Maybe they earn just enough to put $500 aside. At that age, it feels small, almost meaningless. But that seed grows. Decades later, that same 500 can be worth 10,000 or more, simply because it had time to compound. More importantly, that small act of investing changes identity. It shifts someone from an earner into an owner. Once you see yourself as an owner, you begin to ask new questions. How do I protect this? How do I grow this? How do I pass this on? Wealthy people talk about taxes all the time. They swap strategies, hire expensive advisors, and treat tax planning as a core part of their lives. Middle-class people often avoid the subject. It feels taboo or complicated or out of reach. That silence is part of why the middle stays stuck. The less you talk about the game, the less you notice that it even exists. The curtain metaphor is real. Once you see how taxes shape outcomes, you can't go back to thinking everyone plays by the same rules. The wealthy aren't smarter, they're simply paying attention to a stage that others ignore. And behind that curtain, one truth stands tall. Ownership isn't optional if you want to escape the grind. Ownership is the doorway to lower taxes, greater freedom, and generational wealth. If you found value here, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts or questions. Share it with someone you care about, because these lessons matter more when they're passed along. I wish you luck as you build and protect your future. And when you're ready to keep learning, feel free to explore the other videos on this channel. I'll see you in the next one.